Hi, in this video we're going to talk about how to add and subtract fractions. So when you add and subtract fractions, you must have the same denominator. There are two possibilities. One, the denominators will be the same to begin with, and then you just add the numerators and put it over a common denominator. If the denominators are not the same, then you will need to find the least common denominator. You will rewrite each fraction in an equivalent form so that you have the same denominator, and then you follow step 1 to add them. Remember to simplify the result, as we always do with fractions, if possible. And also, please never ever you're going to add the denominators together. This is not how it's going to work. So let's start with an easy example. We've got 1/5 plus 3/5. The denominators are exactly the same. So what we're going to do is add the numerators. So 1 plus 3 over 5, which gives us 4 over 5. This is in the simplest form. You cannot simplify it, so that's how it's going to stay. 5/6 minus 1/6. Again, the denominators are exactly the same. So we're going to do 5 minus 1 over 6. That's 4 over 6. Now 4 over 6, both numbers can be divided by 2. So if I divide the denominator by 2 and divide the numerator by 2, I will get 2/3. Moving on. 3/8 plus 5/8, again the same denominator, so we add the numerators, so it's going to be 3 plus 5 over 8. That's going to be 8 over 8. In this case we are going to get 1 when it's simplified. 9/14 minus 4/14, same denominator. 9 minus 4 over 14, which will give us 9 minus 4 is 5. 5 over 14, you cannot simplify that. It's going to stay like that. 2/15 plus 7/15, same denominator. 2 plus 7 over 15 is going to give us 9 over 15, which both numbers can be divided by 3. We can simplify this fraction. That is going to give us 3/5. Alright, so now what happens when the denominators are not going to be the same? So if they're not the same, you're going to have to make them the same, right? For that, you will need to find common denominator. So we'll look at the first example here, example 6. We got 1/4 and 3/8. So what is the least common denominator? What is the smallest number that can be divided by both 4 and 8? That number is 8. Right? 8 can be divided by 8 and 8 can be divided by 4. So, but what do we need to do now? Let me rewrite that. So we got 1/4 plus 3/8. We obviously have 8 in one of our fractions, but we don't have 8 in the other one. So how can we get 8 out of 4? Well, we're going to have to multiply by 2. But when we multiply by 2, we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator. Because remember, you have to keep an equivalent fraction. So 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8, obviously. Plus 3 over 8. And that's going to be 2 plus 3 over 8. And that is 5/8. Next example, we got 5/16 and minus 1/18. So what is the least common multiple here between those two fractions? Well, if you think about this, 18 is divisible by 18 obviously, and 18 is also divisible by 6. So 18 will be our number. So we already have 18 here. The other fraction needs 18. So multiply 6 by what to get 18? That is 3. Right? So we're going to have 15/18 minus 1/18, which is going to be 15 minus 1 divided by 18, which is going to be what? 14 over 18, and it can simplify. Both numbers can be divided by 2. It's going to be 7/9. All right, moving on. So now we're getting into situations when it's not as simple because you cannot take one number multiplied by something to get the other number. So it's got to take a little bit more thinking here. So first of all, what is the least common multiple between 20 and 30? That's going to be 60. Because 60 can be divided by 30 and 60 can also be divided by 20. So now in this case we're going to have to multiply both fractions by a number, not necessarily the same. Well, most of the time it's not the same. So you're going to have to figure out a number for each fraction. So what do we need to multiply 20 by to get 60? That will be 3. Numerator and the denominator. What do we multiply 30 by to get 60? Times 2. Same thing, top and the bottom. So now we are going to rewrite that. 3 times 3 is 9 over 60 plus 14 over 60. So now we have the same denominator. And we can add the numerators. 9 plus 14 over 60, which is going to give us 23 over 60. And that's in the simplest form. 8 over 9 minus 7 over 30. So we're going to have to subtract these two numbers, and we need to find the least common multiple like we do before. So between 9 and 30, the least common multiple will be 90. 90 is divisible by 30 and 90 is divisible by 9. So again, both fractions need to be recalculated so that the denominators are going to be the same. We want to get 90 on the bottom. So 9 times what gives you 90? That would be 10, top and the bottom. 30 times what gives you 90 times 3. Remember, you always want to try to find a number that you can multiply by to get your common multiple. Alright, so what are we getting here? We're getting 80 over 90 minus 21 over 90. 80 minus 21 will give you 59 over 90. This cannot be simplified. That's the answer. 5/8 plus 4, 15. So now it's getting even more challenging. So what we have here is a situation when the least common multiple will actually be the product of the two numbers. The only way you can get the least common multiple here, because of what these numbers are, is going to be their product, which is going to be 120, which is 8 times 15. Okay, so it doesn't really change anything. You are still going to work on that the same way. You're just going to have to multiply by, basically multiply the denominator by the other fraction by what the other fraction has. So we're going to multiply this one by 15, again top and the bottom always. Multiply this one by 8. That will obviously give you the same denominator, which will be 120. So we're going to get 75 over 120 plus 32 over 120, and you can now add the numerators together since the denominators are the same, and that will be 107 over 120. It's in the simplest form, cannot be simplified. 8 over 21 minus 3 over 20. Again, we have a similar situation that both denominators need to be multiplied to get a common denominator, which is going to be 420, which is 21 times 20. So, again, does not change anything. We're still going to approach it the same way. We are going to need the common denominator. So you're going to multiply this by 20, multiply this by 20. But this one we're going to multiply by 21, both top and the bottom. Remember, you're always going to multiply top and the bottom by that, whatever that number is that you are using. So what are we getting? We're getting 160 over 420. That's the first fraction. Second fraction is going to be 63 over 420, and that's going to become 97. 160 minus 63 is 97 over 420 does not simplify anymore. Okay. Alright, now we have this example where we have three fractions. So the challenge, of course, here is going to be that you need to figure out a number that can be divisible by all three numbers, 15, 9, and 12. That number is actually going to be 180. So the least common multiple is going to be 180. So for each fraction that's involved, you're going to have to figure out what to multiply the numerator and the denominator by to get 120. Okay, so the first fraction you're going to have to multiply by 12. This fraction will need to be multiplied by 20. And this here we're going to need to multiply that by 15. Okay. So, what do we have then? We're going to have 48 over 180 plus 100 over 180 minus 105 over 180. So that's going to become 48 plus 100 minus 105 divided by 180, and it is all going to give us 43 over 180. Does not simplify. That's already in the simplest form. Okay. And I'll have a couple more examples in this situation. What if you're trying to add or subtract and one of the numbers is not going to be a fraction? So you have an integer and a fraction. You're trying to add or subtract them. So what's going to change? Well, the only thing that you need to know about these problems is if it's not a fraction, you can always turn it into a fraction by putting it over 1. So when you put these 2 over 1, it becomes a fraction. And now you need the common denominator. So now we're going to have 3/5 plus 2 over 1. Obviously, the least common multiple here is going to be 5. That's pretty easy in such case. So we do not need to do anything about the first fraction. We multiply the second fraction, top and the bottom, by 5 to get the same denominator. And that's going to become 3/5 plus 10/5, and that's going to become 13/5. This is an improper fraction. Whether or not you're going to need to write it as a mixed number or leave it in that form depends on what the problem that you may be working on is going to ask for. So I'm just going to leave it like that. It can also be converted into a mixed number if needed, but we're going to leave it like that. Okay, and the last example we have here, 5 minus 5/8. So we do the same thing. We're going to put 5 over 1. So now it's 5 over 1 minus 5 over 8. Obviously, our least common multiple will be 8. So we're going to need to multiply only the first fraction, top and the bottom, by 8 to make our denominators equal each other. So that's going to give us 40 over 8 minus 5 over 8, which is going to give us 40 minus 5. That's 35 over 8. Again, maybe you need to write it as a mixed number. I'll leave it as an improper fraction, which sometimes is also acceptable. And this is how it's done.